Hey guys, I'm Drago, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do for this video. So, guys, I need your help. I have no ideas, please help. That's right, for this video, I asked you guys what I should draw. I did a series of polls on my community tab, and throughout those polls we decided that we would be drawing something very interesting actually. Firstly, you all voted for a mythical creature, and from there you wanted a dragon. Not surprised, honestly. Out of the types of dragons I listed, you were all most interested in seeing a Quetzalcoatl. Very unique, I love this. I then gave a list of themes, and you all wanted the corruption theme. Again, not surprised since horror is my sort of thing, and I'm quite happy with that option actually. And then finally, I wanted to know what elements I should make this Quetzal. And you all decided on the ice element, which again is really unique and different. I'm really excited for that one. So overall, based on what you guys decided, today we are drawing an ice element Quetzalcoatl dragon, which is corrupted. A really interesting mix of themes, which is going to make a really interesting design. And I was very excited to see how this will turn out. So let's get going. To start off with, I had to visualize in my head how these elements are going to come together. So to do that, I got some reference images, a couple of some ice and ice crystals, and another of a snowy owl, because Quetzalcoatls are known as wind serpents and are also very feathery. It was going to have feathered wings and lots of feathers in other places, and I thought since it's ice element, that snowy owl feathers or something similar would work really well for this. But I started off trying to get a general shape and pose. And after that, I was able to think more about the actual design elements. Now, in the sketch, you're going to see me experimenting a lot to be able to get somewhere where I really actually liked it. And I did this whole sketch of the head and then the wings. And I looked at it the next day and I really did not like how it was turning out. I wanted to go for more of a realistic look. Not fully realistic, you know, semi-realism. But this was turning out quite cartoony in a way. And I didn't like that. I didn't think it was going to fit the theme. So in the end, I put that layer on a lower opacity and I drew back over it again. This time focusing more on the anatomy and making things a bit more realistic. And this time I think it turned out so much better with the snake-like head and the wings being a lot more accurate to like feathered bird wings. I think it looks a lot better. Now in general, my idea of the design was to lean both into the ice element and the corruption element, and have the idea that when this Quetzal got corrupted, its ice element powers went into overdrive, and it got to a point where it actually started harming the dragon, and so we had these large crystals of ice that burst through the skin due to an overproduction of its ice element. Not only that, but I had part of its body completely open with the ribs sticking out, because I wanted to allude to frostbite as well and necrotic flesh. With how the ice element is working overtime, it's gone into overdrive. It's getting too cold for the Quetzal's body to handle, which is causing the flesh to get frostbite and go necrotic. On top of that, some of the ice I had that is dripping out from, say, the mouth and the parts that are open, I made a sort of more purpley tone in the end, because I wanted those to be like it's the corrupted fluid. A mixture of blood and this dark corrupted purple fluid. I don't know why I associate corruption with sort of dark purple, but I do. And I wanted that ice to represent that, and to also really drive home how the ice element has gone into overdrive, because if it can freeze blood and this really thick corrupted fluid, then things are really cold, like liquid nitrogen cold. But that was my general idea, and I spent a lot of time sketching it out and making sure every design element idea that I had in my head worked together and fit nicely. Lining this beast took a long time because there was so much small details that I put into this, and I really wanted to make sure everything was stand out and it all worked together and everything was nice and defined, which meant I went back over a lot of areas and did a lot of line weight variation too, just to make sure that you could see each element perfectly fine. And that's a tip for you. If you're lining something with a lot of small details and you feel that those details sort of going to get lost within each other, then try use line weight variation, because that way you can make sure that parts that overlap are very separate from each other. You can tell that one part is in front of another part because you've thickened that line and you've made sure to make it bold and separate them and define it nicely. I will always say it in every video, line weight variation is so important if you're someone that does line art. I did at first think about possibly putting in some lines for the scales, but in the end I decided to save doing the scales for the later texturing phase, which I think was a good call in the end. However, I did make sure to add plenty of texture with the lines on the feathers. Not too much so that it's just all black lines everywhere, but enough that it could sort of guide me when it came to my texturing and help define the notches and the different strands of a feather that there are. The rest of the lining was pretty straightforward, just doing things like on the ice crystals, making sure that I showed both the front side and a little bit of the back side as well to give it more of that 3D look. Now, when it came to the colouring, it took me a very long time to think of a colour palette that I actually liked. So at first I decided to just focus on making sure every part was filled out with their flat colour base. And while I was doing that, I was trying to think of what to do for the general colour scheme. I mean, I knew that the winds would be sort of a very light colour because of the snowy owl theme. I knew that the ice crystals would be sort of bluish, sort of going towards bluish white. I knew that the purple ice would be a pale purple, but in terms of the actual body of the dragon, I could not come up with a colour that I liked. As you can see, initially I went for this very light colour, and I went through and I added in some patterns, putting these in a darker tone. And with these patterns, I wanted to lean a little bit into the Mesoamerican origins of the Quetzalcoatl, and I went with these very square patterns, because I felt that fit quite well. Once I laid them out, I used my brush just to very roughly go over them, because I wanted it to be a very sort of loose looking pattern, not too refined, the edges aren't too hard, it just gives it a bit more of an organic look that way. However, I still wasn't liking the colour scheme, so then I tried to go for a darker colour scheme, with the body being a darker blue and the patterns being a slightly lighter blue. And I stuck with that for a while as I went into the texturing phase. Because I still wasn't sure about the colours of the body, I decided to leave texturing the body to last, which is very not like what I usually do. Usually the body's the first thing I do. But in this case, I wanted to have really time to think about the colour scheme. And so I went through and textured everything else first. Did this using my usual watercolour brush. I absolutely love the Psy watercolour brush. It's like my saviour. I love it. I had it on a blocks texture and I just added tones on everything, making sure to add the ridges of the ice crystals and the strands of each feather, just defining everything, giving it some texture, making everything look a little bit more 3D and realistic. Hey guys, Editing Drago here. I actually lost some of the footage because it got corrupted or something. Like, I tried to add it into my editing program and it just won't load. So basically what you've missed is me adding a bit of a red hue to the ice crystals to add a little bit of blood in them, and texturing the purple ice crystals, which in the end I decided to make a little bit darker, and also add some red hues for blood in them as well. So that's what you missed. Sorry that it got corrupted. I really don't know what happened there. But yeah, let's keep going. I decided on a pattern for the feathers. Not 100% like a snowy owl, but inspired by the snowy owl. I basically used an airbrush to add this sort of grungy gradient to it, which I initially was going to have sort of more brown, but I turned to be more sort of bluish grey instead, which I think fit the overall vibe and theme of the ice. And then I also used my scatter brush to add some spots and speckles. And I really like the pattern of the winds. I think it turned out quite cool. Now finally, I settled on a colour scheme for the body. I decided on making the body a sort of desaturated pale bluish grey. Not too light but not too dark either. And then have the pattern actually be lighter than that. I first went through and I slightly erased the edges of the patterns with a eraser on a lower opacity just to sort of grunge it up a little bit, make it look a little bit more organic and painterly. Then I worked on adding in the 3D-ness with the texturing, just make sure every ridge, every muscle of the body is shown. And then I went in and I started to add the blood and the necrotic frostbitten flesh. I did this simply with my airbrush, just being really light and dabbing on my tablet to add each tone, just to really grunge up the flesh and show the actual injury for what it is. Each wound, each injury, it's all got dye and necrotic flesh, and it's all got blood. And then from there, it was time for scales. And yes, I drew every single scale by hand. I was dead by the end of it. But a really easy way to do scales is to have 2 layers. One on a blending mode that is like shade or overlay or multiply, any sort of darker one. And then another on a blending mode that is on anything lighter like shine or a lighter overlay or screen or anything like that. So you want a darker one and a lighter one. On the darker one, draw in the ridges of each scale, the outline. You can be really loose with it and they don't have to be 100% like perfect with the pattern. And then on the lighter layer, just to add a line to add a little bit of a shine to each scale and really make them pop like they are a 3D thin. It's a really simple way to do scales and it can be quite effective, especially if you're doing really small scales, because as soon as you zoom out, then it looks really good. It really does look like your creature has a 3D scale texture when you do this. Plus, putting the layers on those blending modes means that these scales will overlay any pattern that you have below. So as you can see, these scales are perfectly overlaying the pattern that I have without hiding the pattern, without having to do a separate colour for the pattern parts. It works really well. After all the scales were done, I added a little bit of blood dripping. I didn't want to do too much blood because the idea of this was that things were so cold that the blood was freezing. But I do think that a little bit of fresh blood would still be seeping out. So I added a little bit of blood on each piece of ice that was sticking out. Just a little bit sort of trailing down. And also maybe it's still quite thick, maybe it's still partially frozen blood, who knows? But I just wanted to emphasise each wound a little bit more. And then the final thing to do after that was the shading. Not too much, just to add a little bit of definition in areas, make sure each part popped out. I did this simply using multiply layers, overlay layers, and a few shine layers. And yeah, this basically was just to make sure that everything was nice and defined, because there is no actual environmental light in here. And there we have it, the design as decided by you guys. This ice element corrupted Quetzalcoatl is such a unique theme, and that's why I was so excited to do something like this where you guys decide what I draw, because I knew the mix we'd get would be so cool and so unique. And this was a lot of fun to think about and design, and it was good practice too, actually. Overall, I'm quite happy with how this turned out. I think I was able to incorporate every design element that was asked for. We had the ice crystals sticking out, we had the corruption having make the ice element go on overdrive, causing these wounds and this corruptive fluid that is still frozen itself to seep out. And we also had this dye and necrotic flesh to add more to the corruption. And it shows how this once magnificent, majestic creature has fallen prey to whatever has corrupted it, and it's now this almost half zombie-like monster. So let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think I did this design justice? Do you think there are things I could have done differently? And based on the design themes we were given, what would you have made? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for participating in the polls for this video. If you enjoyed, maybe leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. A huge shout out to my members. I appreciate all of you guys for your support. You are amazing. Thank you so much. And if you want some exclusive perks, then make sure to become a channel member by pressing the join button down below. And I hope to see all of you wonderful people in the next video. Bye!